Wichita Liberty TV, featuring host Bob Weeks. Local politics without the spin. Interviews with nationally respected economists. Hear directly from Kansas conservatives about what matters to you. It's individual liberty, limited government, and free markets. Wichita Liberty TV.
Welcome to Wichita Liberty TV this week. I'm your host, Bob Weeks, just as I am every week. And this week in the studio with me, Andy Hooser, host of The Voice for Reason with Andy Hooser on KQAM radio here in Wichita. Your show, noon to 2, Monday through Friday.
Yes, sir.
On KQAM 1480, but also on TuneIn Radio and other internet apps, I think, and then also a podcast you put up every day, which I think is also a pretty convenient way. If you can't listen to it live, you can listen to it recorded. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And Andy, you've heard you talking today a little bit about how you've been here like 8 or 9 months in Wichita. So what do you think so far now that you've had, not even a year, but it's good enough to be there? How are you doing in Wichita?
I love Wichita. I love it. It reminds me of the community of Ohio that I grew up in, with the farming, the agriculture, away from the progressive of the state of Colorado and the progressives there. And I love it. I'm getting into the community, starting to see some more sites around here, really starting to get a feel for the community, and I love it. I love being here.
Well, we're glad to have you here, Andy. I know your radio show has been growing and some good things there. So obviously, you and also your colleague at KQAM, Joseph Ashby, who does the morning shift, a lot of talk about the presidential election. And right now, there's a lot of controversy now about Donald Trump and the Republican National Committee and the way that all these delegates are selected. In particular, Colorado, your most recent state there, had a convention, and Ted Cruz was somehow able to snag all the delegates that were available in Colorado. Trump says that's not fair. But first of all, for a guy like Donald Trump to whine about not being fair, that's one thing. But the other thing is, Trump always talks about how our company is run by stupid people, that he is smart, he knows how to get things done. Look at my business record, he says. But here's a relatively simple, although arcane, political process, and he totally flubbed it up. Does that tell us anything about Donald Trump?
Well, one of my listeners on my show made a good analogy, is that Trump is really good at playing the game of checkers when it comes to business. He knows to negotiate deals. He knows how to make good deals. He's a good business guy, but going into politics takes the game from from checkers to chess. And I think he skipped the entire section about Chinese checkers in there as well. He understands how to make business, and he may be good at that. But when it comes to politics, he doesn't understand the rules. He doesn't have any type of grassroots campaign because he doesn't like to pay for, I don't know if it's his business side of being conservative with money, but he doesn't like to pay for campaign managers in states to linger there, to create any kind of grassroots movement at all. So he's lacking on that field, along with the fact that he's not very knowledgeable with the state laws, state by state by state, when it comes to the primaries and the caucuses.
And it's not that he himself, Donald Trump, has to know all this stuff. He can hire people. I mean, There's people in every state that have been doing this for years and years and years in both parties. They're paid, hired guns for hire, and they will do this type of stuff for you. And that just seems to be an issue of management, which Trump touts that, I will do all this. I am the manager. You guys trust me. But here, it just hasn't worked out for him very well.
It really hasn't. When it shows in Colorado, and what he likes to do when he doesn't win is he likes to say that it's fraudulent, that it's a set-up scheme, that the establishment's out to get him, and that millions of dollars are being paid from these super PACs to try and take him down because he's anti-establishment. They're being paid because it's a political campaign, and the other candidates are trying to attack their opponent, which is what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
It has nothing to do that he's anti-establishment, and the fact that Colorado, I honestly love the process of Colorado, and the process that they use of using a convention by districts, by electing delegates of the people, so the people do have their voice, so it wasn't a voterless election in the state of Colorado. He didn't understand the process. He had zero grassroots campaigning, and Colorado is a state where you have to have a strong grassroots campaign, and that's why Ted Cruz did so well there, is because he's been solid with his grassroots campaigning this entire campaign.
There is, I think, a legitimate concern about some of these delegate processes, that they may not be as democratic as we might want. There are basically, I think, 3 ways, aren't there, Andy, that states choose their delegates. Some have a primary election, full-blown primary. In Kansas, we decided to have a caucus. Actually, the legislature did, because they didn't want to spend approximately $1 million on a statewide primary, so they say to the parties, you guys have a caucus and the parties have to pay for that.
Sure.
So a caucus is a little bit less democratic because it happens on one day. You have to go somewhere, maybe far away in the county. There's not the advanced balloting process and things like that, but at least you still get a chance to vote. And then there's the convention process, which is what I think Colorado had.
Exactly. And honestly, I love the caucus as well, because when you had the primary, you had the early voting, you had the mail-in, you have all this, you have votes for, and we saw it in some of the other states to where there were votes coming in for candidates who have already dropped out a month ago, but the votes were already in. The caucus gives the opportunity, like we saw in the state of Kansas here, with the candidates to be able to come to the state and rally at the caucus. When we saw Donald Trump, when we saw Ted Cruz, when we saw Pompeo campaigning for Rubio.
Yeah.
And then you have the conventions where the voice is still being heard by the people. They get to nominate the delegates who are citizens who are active in the party, who want to be a part of it, who want to be active, and we get to see that. So across the board, if we want to be upset with anybody, in my opinion, it needs to be the Republican National Convention. It needs to be those guys that are setting the rules for the national convention, the RNC convention in Cleveland, where they want to change things up little by little each year that may affect some things. When Ronald Reagan ran back in '76, the reason he didn't get that nomination is because his campaign forced Gerald Ford, or wanted to try and force Gerald Ford to pick a VP running mate before they even campaigned at the convention. That rule didn't go through, but if it would have gone through, Reagan would have had a really good chance of getting the nomination that year. And these rules change year by year. I think if we set those rules to be a solid one each year, and then each state can set up how they want to do it, either convention, primary, or caucus.
Yeah, I do think that stable rules, and I think I heard you talk about this on your show, are a good thing. When there's always, like 4 years ago, they passed a rule that was really targeted against Ron Paul being put into nomination, and I think that those types of rules do cause people to be cynical and think, oh, it's just fixed and everything like that. But one thing good about all this diversity of the way the delegates are chosen is it really lets us see which candidates have it on the ball. Because, they're going to have to manage the world. I mean, that's what guys like Trump want to do, I think, basically. So that's a problem there. Andy, we need to take a moment for a commercial break. So hold on, audience. We'll be back in just a moment for the Voice for Liberty. Well, welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me here this week, Andy Hooser of the Voice for Reason on KQAM Radio. Andy, we've seen some of the major political candidates for president make some really unexplainable gaffes in recent days. Hillary Clinton trying to get on the subway, Bernie saying, I just use a token for the subway, when I think it came out that tokens were abolished 13 years ago. Just the other day, Donald Trump in Pennsylvania said, hey, how's Joe Paterno doing these days, the legendary football coach at Penn State University, not remembering or knowing that he's been dead for 4 years. So I think people look at this and they realize that Hillary Clinton doesn't ride the subway. I mean, she probably hasn't ever, well, not for at least a very long time. She has a huge Secret Service detail to move her around town wherever she needs to go. Why do these people try to be something that they're not?
Well, and it's honestly pretty pathetic in my opinion. I can't stand watching this.
That's a good word, pathetic.
It's pathetic. They're trying to appeal to the commoners, to the regular Joe Schmo voter, trying to get their votes. And you see Hillary Clinton do that. Of course, everybody knows she's not taking the train anywhere else. She's not taking the subway. Bernie Sanders obviously hasn't taken one as well, unless he has his tokens from 15 years ago. Yeah. Donald Trump, I don't know if he pulled a Joe Biden or what he did there about Joe Paterno, and it's really sad to see, because you want to relate to him, and that's what people want. They want someone that relates to them the best in order to appeal to them and support them. But you need to do it in a realistic way. And I know a lot of people go towards the sports and say that I support this sporting team X, Y, or Z, or that they have their livelihoods. Marco Rubio would have been really great at doing that and showing that, I have the same livelihood as what you do, and I understand that. I'm in X amount of student loan debt and so on and so forth. But they're trying to be so personable, because I think that's what people want. but it's coming across really cheesy, and I think a lot of people are starting to notice that, especially in this election, with how much they're paying attention.
And pandering about sports teams, I mean, everybody realizes, that's just kind of for fun and so forth. But, yeah, some of these issues are really important. I guess a surprising thing about the Trump campaign is that he's done so well, even though he is a billionaire, lives in a huge tower, has, 3 young wives and so forth, but yet the average people still seem to be relating to him, at least on some level.
To some level, and I think he would be better, instead of trying to talk about Joe and former coaches. I think he needs to really focus on the fact that how many personalities have come out of employees of his who have met him, people that were in Trump Tower that saw him, that where he stops and talks to the common person and how he's relatable to them. He may be worth $9 billion, but he still relates to the common person and loves to sit and chat with them because he's a personable guy. And if he focused on that to make himself look more realistic and personable, I think that would do him a lot better good than what he's trying to do right now.
Yeah. I think I heard you and Joseph engage in some Rush Limbaugh bashing the other day. Is that right?
Well, Rush Limbaugh seems to have... He's tried to take an approach to this of staying out of endorsing one candidate or another, of attacking one candidate or another, and it hasn't played off well for him. Mike Gallagher is another talk show host who says that he hates being in the crossfire and the shooting squad of our own party, and he's going to support whatever candidate we have, which is fine. And I think he's done a lot better job of that. Rush Limbaugh has come out and openly said, if you're conservative, Ted Cruz is your guy. He's openly come out and said that Donald Trump has some very progressive and liberal ideas, has some very liberal progressive agenda, and he's not the best candidate for us, but yet he then turns around and says that we need to support him, or he tries to defend him in ways that he doesn't need to defend him, and he's been very wishy-washy on this whole issue, and I think a lot of people are starting to see that as well, and I think he's lost some respect.
Well, that just shows how nuts things are this year. I mean, when conservatives are starting to bash Rush Limbaugh and starting not to trust him, that's a symptom of something big going on. Personally, I haven't listened to Rush Limbaugh for a number of years. I try to keep up a little bit, but when icons like him, who's been on the radio 30 years, very popular, that's a problem for the party, I think.
Well, we're seeing a division here, and before we had the division within the Republican Party between the establishment country clubber, quote unquote, rhino Republicans and the Tea Party conservatives, and you saw when the Tea Party conservatives rose, you see this movement of media with the Drudge Report, with RedState.com, with Breitbart.com, and you saw this movement of conservatives. Now with Donald Trump, he's torn it even yet again with the populist movement, where it's not establishment and it's definitely not conservative, but it's the riled up, it's quote-unquote uneducated, just people who are just frustrated at the system, who haven't voted in years, and they want a populist candidate. And now these conservatives are now torn between the populist movement, which you see with Drudge Report and with Breitbart, who openly defend Trump and attack Cruz for any little scandal that may or may not be true, but just to hype up Trump. And then you see some new conservatives coming out with Conservative Review and Mark Levin. You see RedState.com avidly defending Ted Cruz. And you see a split among the conservatives now on who's actually conservative and who's in it for the populist, largest crowd that they can find.
And I certainly understand. Believe me, I do. The throw them all out, throw the bums out. That we need to smash the system and do something different. And that, I think, explains a lot of the popularity not only of Donald Trump but of Bernie Sanders over on the other side of the political aisle as well, that people are tired of people like Hillary Clinton, and they see Bernie as kind of the outsider, the rebel, the revolutionary. He even uses those words, I think.
Which is really funny because of the fact that Bernie Sanders, as you said, he's the outsider of the Democrat Party. He's been an independent for 30 years. The same states that are going for Bernie Sanders, predominantly, other than their home states, majoritively have gone for Ted Cruz.
Oh, really?
And other than Texas and Vermont and then Minnesota, which Marco Rubio won, predominantly every state that one has won, the other one has, showing that the people that want the outsiders realize that Ted Cruz is more of an outsider than Donald Trump. But there's been a very strong correlation, whether it's the polarized political agendas, whether it's the frustration of the outsiders, whatever. I haven't quite put my finger on why, or even the young generation, because the young generation has predominantly gone to those two candidates as well. We've seen a correlation of those states going to those same two candidates on both sides of the aisle.
Very interesting. Well, thanks for bringing that up, Andy. That's good to know. Well, let's take another moment off for a commercial break. This is Wichita Liberty TV, and I'm Bob Weeks. Well, welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me this week, Andy Hooser of KQAM Radio. Okay, lots of stuff going on at the national level, but now all of a sudden we've got some political drama right here in the 4th District of Kansas, the state of Kansas as a whole, which is this year our first-term senator, but long-term congressman before that, Jerry Moran, is up for re-election. Looks like he was going to have some pretty smooth sailing, no one opposing him in the Republican Party, and it seems unlikely that Democrats can do much statewide for a senator. But now all of a sudden we have our 4th District hometown Wichita Representative Mike Pompeo making some noise like he might challenge Jerry Moran for that Senate seat.
He might. From what I've seen, Congressman Pompeo has not done too much attacking of Republicans and his own allies and his own party. He usually sticks to attacking Democrats. He's relatively conservative, and I do like Congressman Pompeo, but he hasn't really attacked his own party too much. But when Jerry Moran has come out and advocated for the hearing of the Supreme Court nominee Garland, Mike Pompeo was very critical of that. And he was very outspoken.
Critical of Jerry Moran.
Critical of Jerry Moran. And when I had him on my show, I asked him straight up if he was going to run and challenge him in a primary, and he completely sidestepped the question, said that he was going to do what's best for the people, so on and so forth. I don't think he's made up a decision yet, but it's a good possibility. And I think he needs a challenge with some of the things that Jerry Moran has done lately, is showing his true colors. He's not the solid conservative as what some may have thought. He reminds me kind of a freshman senator out of Colorado that I saw right before I left, Cory Gardner, who was during the campaign is shown as the right-wing crazy conservative when his voting record has been very middle-of-the-road mainstream. And as soon as he got in office, worked across the aisle with the Democrat senator from Colorado to propose bills to try and punish other Republicans. And Jerry Moran's starting to go down that same road, and it's kind of troubling.
So we saw 2 years ago that Milton Wolfe challenged Pat Roberts. That did not go very well for both Dr. Wolfe, but also for Kansas Republicans. There is something called the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Jerry Moran was the chair of that 2 years ago. And the stated goal of that committee is re-elect Republican incumbents to the United States Senate without regard to merit, just re-elect those. And Jerry Moran, they went all out for Thad Cochran in Mississippi a couple years ago when he was facing a very strong Tea Party-like challenger. And boy, if Mike Pompeo decides to run against Jerry Moran, he's going to step into that buzzsaw too, I think, won't he?
He really is. I mean, since Jerry Moran has so much influence with these types of committees, wanting to keep Republicans in there regardless of where they stand, regardless of conservative principles. Mike Pompeo has a long uphill road to fight if he does it, but I kind of hope he does. I hope that he does try to challenge, or at least somebody does. Jerry Moran just came out actually today and is working with a Democratic senator out of New Jersey, Cory Booker, I believe his name is, to try and create savings plans for taxpayers. So anybody who gets a tax refund has an opportunity to keep the money in the federal government under a savings plan, which is completely unneeded. I don't know why that the government needs to be a national bank. I don't know why they need to hold on to our funds, because it shows the sign that he wants more government infiltration into our personal lives, and something like that needs to be stopped, especially with a senator representing a conservative state like Kansas.
Yeah. So I personally, though, find this pretty puzzling. I mean, Mike Pompeo's been in office, well, he was elected in 2010, so he's in his third term now, and he's really made a name for himself, I think. I mean, he has good committee assignments. He's really kind of a go-to guy for television and radio commentators when they need someone to speak about a certain type of issues. He would, first of all, have to kind of start over again from the ground up if he did win Senate, but if he lost the Senate race, a lot of that, I think, would be, his prestige he's built up would be gone, I think.
I think so. I think so. He's taken a risk to do it. I mean, he's got a good seat with the Congress right now, with the House. He's done a lot of good things, as you mentioned. He's fought for a lot of conservative values and represented that seat well. And I think between him and Tim Huell's camp, I think that we've had a solidly conservative representative here in the state of Kansas. And he's taking a gamble doing it. But if he decides to do it, I think it would be because he thinks it's for the better good. I think that he thinks that we could have a larger say and a larger voice for Kansas in the Senate rather than what we have right now, because it's looking bleak.
Yeah, that's interesting. And of course, if Mike Pompeo were to challenge Jerry Moran, that opens up his seat, and we'd be, it'd be quite a scuffle around here to figure out who's going to run for that. I would expect to see a lot of people, and I think they even talk about Joseph Ashby, don't they?
We joked about it. It actually started off with an April Fool's joke that we did with the show of me taking over the mornings of him, initially him running to compete against Jerry Moran, and then it went into the idea that if Congressman Pompeo did run, who could fill that seat? And the ideas of Joseph came up. The ideas of Secretary of State Chris Kobach has come up. Someone mentioned that on my show today as well.
Well, he's in the wrong. I mean, he lives in Kansas City, Kansas, so
sure.
Wrong district.
Wrong district there. But I think we have a big enough plate of options that if Congressman Pompeo decides to run, or if he doesn't, someone else decides to step up and try and compete against Jerry Moran, I think we would have an open enough plate to where we could have a deep roster of someone who might be able to do it well.
Well, there are a lot of Republicans down here in the 4th District. I mean, you can start to name them if we want to, but I would, I'd like to see Joseph do that. I mean, I think the problem is all of this for Mike Pompeo and for anybody is the filing deadline is the first Monday in June, I believe. So here we are in the middle of April. We're talking 6 weeks or something like that, which is not much time to get a campaign up and running. And the primary, of course, would be the beginning of August, that is. So not a lot of time to do a lot of these things.
There's really not. There's not a lot of time to do it, and especially I know more people are focused on what's going to happen at the convention in July with the RNC, and where kind of the shift is going to go towards the general election could play out on a lot of factors here as well.
Yeah, so it's going to be a busy summer for politics, not only in Kansas, but across the state as well. Remember, this year, all of our Kansas State senators, all 40, are up for re-election, and of course, Democrats and moderate Republicans are making noise there too. Andy, we are out of time, so it's been a pleasure. Thank you for appearing on the Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks with Andy Hooser. We'll see you again next week.